among people who are skeptical about Ericksonian hypnosis, there is an opinion that this is kind of a cult of personality of Milton Erickson. Nevertheless, his influence in the field was enormous, and you are one of the most famous students of Milton Erickson.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you start to to learn from him in the first place? Why did you decide to stay
Well,
to learn?
first of all, there are cults about every form of therapy.
Yeah.
So Virginia Satir, we could say that there was a cult around Virginia Satir. Freud, we could say there was a cult around him. Tim Beck, Aaron Beck, we could say there was a cult around him. So psychotherapy has been a series of personalities that have developed a new way of thinking about therapy. And then there should be skeptics.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important that people are skeptical and that they're critiquing and trying to find out what is the essence, what is really important, and what does this add that no other theory has added before, that no other technique has added before. And we never tried to make Ericksonian therapy into a special school. We don't have teaching members, we don't have any members. Our goal from the beginning has been to integrate some of the influences of Erickson into the mainstream of psychotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I started studying about Erickson in about 1973, and I was in my master's program. I was doing an internship, and probably 1972.
Mm-hmm.
And the psychiatrist supervisor was training me, and he was an expert in hypnosis. So I thought I wanted to learn something about hypnosis.
You were curious, right?
I was curious. And so he said, come to my office on Saturday, I'll hypnotize you.
Mm-hmm.
And now I had all kinds of trepidations. I thought I was going to lose control, or I was going to do foolish things. And I was scared, but I was curious. So I went to his office, and he said that I should stare at a spot on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And I was nervous. And I started rolling my fingers
Mm-hmm.
on my knee.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said to me, watch your fingers as they're rolling on your knee.
Mm-hmm.
Watch as the timing of those movements change. Watch as it slows down. And then as it slows down, you can take a deep breath and close your eyes. And this was my first experience of utilization.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He was utilizing my nervousness to create the trance. And that was fascinating to me. I didn't even have a name for it. And I said, who should I read? And he said, well, read Milton Erickson.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, who? Because I didn't know anything, and I hadn't learned about Erickson in my graduate program.
And that moment he was not that
He
famous.
was not that famous. He was well known
Mm-hmm.
in hypnosis circles, but he was not well known in psychotherapy. It was only with the publication of Jay Haley's book, Uncommon Therapy, in 1973, that Erickson became known. So I got a collection of his papers. It was a very expensive book. I was a poor student, and I was stunned. And I was just intrigued because he was thinking so differently than anything I had learned.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what interested me in learning and eventually meeting Erickson.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, your first encounter with Ericksonian approach to hypnosis, what do you think during these years of development of this approach, what has it brought to the to the field of psychotherapy during these years?
Right.
And what remains to be brought?
Right. Well, there's a lot of things that Erickson was doing that he added to the literature. Erickson discussed hundreds of cases. I think Freud only added 13 cases to the literature, and Erickson added hundreds of cases. And these cases are available for students to study and to try to learn about some of the strategies, some of the techniques, some of the orientation that he used. And we are still mining them. We still don't understand fully all of the things that Erickson did. And even though it's more than 30 years, 33 years since he died, there's still a lot to be learned from the methodology, from the orientation, and from the practice. Erickson was not a theorist. He wasn't interested in creating a theory. He was a very pragmatic American who was interested in how can I help people to get from point A to point B, from a state of being constricted and rigid and inflexible to a state of being more adaptable, more generative, more flexible. And he was very good at what he did, and he still has a lot to teach us.
Lately, you have been telling very interesting, useful things about personality, about the personal impact, but in the area of evidence-based medicine, of evidence-based psychotherapy, where does it leave psychotherapy really, and where does it leave us as therapists?
Well, evidence basis is good when you are working with a problem that is concrete. And so if the problem is how do you do surgery, then there should be a protocol and a generally accepted way of proceeding, and this is the way that you do surgery so that you get the best possible outcome. Psychotherapy is not a science to me. It's more of an art. It's an art of how do you help people to bring out the best in themselves. And it's a little bit harder to have an evidence-based practice.
Yeah.
The research hasn't caught up yet. Research is a little slower and innovation is a little quicker. So I think someday that there'll be more of an evidence basis for some of the things that Erickson was doing. The evidence for what Erickson was doing is more in the field of social psychology, where social psychologists demonstrate how people respond to attributions, demand characteristics, how people respond to emotional contagion, social mimicry. All of this research is a basis of what Erickson was doing,
And
but it's not
neuroscience, is it right?
neuroscience. Yes, because the work of Ernest Rossi, who was close, very close to Erickson, closer than me, and wrote more about Erickson than anyone. And he is very interested in psychosocial genomics, a field that he invented. So he talks about the neuroscience basis. I talk about the kind of interactive social basis of what Erickson's approach. Other people talk about Erickson in terms of power, or they talk about Erickson in terms of linguistics. So there's many lenses that have been used to try to understand what Erickson does.
And let's raise a question about our own development as psychotherapists. I know that you put much emphasis on this in your teaching. What do you think, what are the directions of internal search? What are the orientations for psychotherapists to work upon?
Right. Well, when I learned psychotherapy, I learned that it was a process from my mouth to your ears. And that therapy was done by virtue of the information that you gave the patient. But we learned that there are what is called non-specific factors that make up more of the variance of why psychotherapy is successful than the techniques. There are things that therapists can learn to do better, which is how to use communication, how to make therapy into a visual art, how to use gestures, how to use proximity, how to use expression, how to use the tone and tempo of voice. And these were things that were inherent in Erickson that really don't exist in other schools of psychotherapy to the same degree. So Erickson was an explorer of human communication. How can you use all of the output channels of communication to have a decided effect on another person? And so that's one of the lessons, one of the many lessons that we learned from Erickson. And when I train therapists, I want to train them to think, how can we use visual images, gestures, objects in the room? How can we use expression? How can we use the tempo of our voice in order to have an effect and increase the impact of the words? The words only account for part of the variants about why therapy is successful.
If we can say in a few words, what is about therapy? What is about to you? What it is about?
Well, therapy could be defined as a symbolic drama of change, the meaning of which is, by living this experience, you will be different. So I cast psychotherapy as an experiential enterprise. You create experiences in the form of stories or hypnosis or tasks or directives, metaphors, and as you create these, what I would call reference experiences, you help to empower people out of their previously stuck spaces and help them to be more flexible and adaptable to their environment. So psychotherapy doesn't just happen in the office. Psychotherapy happens in life. And so we create situations in life where people can surmount their limitations and become more empowered to be flexible and adaptive.
And considering life, what is it about? What is it like to be Jeffrey Zeig as a personality? What are your personal priorities in your life?
Well, my professional life is traveling and teaching, and that is very important to me to disseminate the information that I've learned from Erickson. But really, the goal of living is to grow. And so I'm interested in my growth and my development, how I can be a better Jeff Zeig, how I can be more thoughtful, more kind, more incisive, more perceptive. And learning about hypnosis and learning about Erickson has helped me to be a better Jeff Zeig. And my professional life is only a small part of my interests and my hobbies. And being a father is certainly an important part of my life.
What is the most essential thing in Ericksonian approach that, how did it change your life?
Well, the most essential thing is utilization. Utilization is a doctrine of sufficiency, that whatever exists in the environment, whatever exists in the patient's, in the total weave of the patient's situation, rather than analyzing it, you find a way to utilize it. And that concept, once I got it, that changed my life. And basically there are only challenges, only opportunities to utilize. So if you can utilize the patient's resistances, utilize the patient's behavior patterns, utilize the patient's values, utilize the family situation, utilize the environment, whatever exists, you try to find the gold. The aphorism in English is, if you have lemons, make lemonade. Find some way of making things, of empowering what exists and making it a little bit better.
You know, one of our therapists, when he was asked how he changed when he started to study hypnosis, he said, I got a little bolder. Now, could you say, how did you change?
Yeah, well, I think I became more perceptive, and I became more intentional and more thoughtful about what it is that I'm doing, and especially more precise, so that when I'm with somebody and I'm trying to impact them therapeutically, I try to make as much precise as I can. The words that I'm saying, the meaning of the words, the gestures, the meaning of the gestures, the expression, the meaning of the expression, and I really try to focus as intently as I can on another human being. And hypnosis has taught me to do that, and the effect of that is it's a matter of being loving. That you're being incredibly loving to another human being and doing your best to empower that person. Using every channel that you can possibly use to empower that human being.
A few words about your recent books, and what are you working on right now?
Yeah, well, I just finished a book on hypnotic induction that it is basically a 3-day workshop. If you came to a 3-day fundamental workshop with me, this is what you would learn. And then we're trying to put together a book of stories about Milton Erickson, so that the people who knew him, they told lots of stories, and they're interesting stories that shed light on Erickson. So that's another book that I'm working on right now. And but I've edited books on couples therapy, and I've edited books on general psychotherapy. And Confluence, the book of my papers, is now available in Russian.
Yeah, that's great. The last question. What can you say, what can you suggest to a young therapist who may be watching this interview and hearing about Ericksonian hypnosis for the first time, or thinking about becoming psychotherapists? What could you say to them as the encouragement?
Well, you know, Erickson is one model, and it's a model that fits me and my personality style. And Virginia Satir's style may fit someone else, and Aaron Beck's style may fit someone else. So for young psychotherapists, it's a matter of exploration. It's trying different styles, and what's important is finding a mentor, finding somebody who really speaks to you and can help you to develop yourself. And it's not the technique, it's not the theories, it's not the information. The really important thing is developing yourself as a tool, and that best happens in an interpersonal situation where you find a mentor who can really help you to bring out the best in yourself.
Well, thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Appreciate it. Thank you.